Thank you for joining this NEAS webinar on student support. My name's Ben Colthorpe. I'm the Operations Manager and I'll be leading us through this webinar today. And I'll be supported by my colleague Cameron Heath, who's also on the line. I'm just going to hand over to Cameron now, and he's just going to go through a little bit of housekeeping for the webinar.
Thanks, Ben. Welcome, everyone. I'd just like to check to have your mute function on, video off at the moment. There will be opportunities in the future to unmute your mic and provide your response. So please also, if you have any questions during the webinar, to use the chat functionality, which is down at the bottom. And we will also be putting up a poll during the webinar. So if you could also answer that, that would be great. We will look to answer your questions usually by the end of the webinar. There'll be also another time to speak as well. But over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Cam. I will just mention that I'm having trouble viewing the chat box at the moment. So if you do have any questions in there, it might just take us a little while to get to them. So maybe best to use the Q&A time at the end. We'll allow 5 to 10 minutes of question time. But we'll move on with today's webinar. And before we get started, I do just like to provide a very brief outline of NEAS's current PD offerings. Our central point of PD every year is our annual management conference. And while unfortunately we weren't able to proceed with this year's conference, it's very much all systems go for 2021. We're looking forward to a really good conference in Sydney in May next year. At this stage, it's looking to be a blended conference, so we will have some time in Sydney for those that are able to make it, supported by a virtual conference schedule. And so prior to COVID-19, NEAS ran quality learning series face-to-face workshops around the country. We now are running these webinars as an alternative. And we also have a suite of short self-paced online courses available on our website. And these all align with the NEAS quality framework. So they're great courses to do, for example, if you wanted to target Area A, teaching, learning and assessment, or if you wanted a refresher with strategy, risk and governance, you can really target the PD that you want staff to do. And again, just a reminder, all staff of a NEAS endorsed centre have free access to these courses. In addition to those, we've got specialisation courses, and there's now a master practitioner in ELT, which can be achieved. And that's kind of the final checkpoint or the final professional development certificate, if you like, that you can achieve with NEAS. So if you haven't been to our website lately, I'd encourage you to check it out. It's neas.org.au. There's a stack of new information there to have a look at. So today's webinar is on student support. And if you're like me, you would have looked at this topic and gone, this is a very big topic. And certainly it's an extremely big topic considering we've only got 1 hour together this afternoon. So look, we're going to do our best to achieve these 3 outcomes for participants. We want you to be able to identify some key components of a student support framework. We'd love to demonstrate some best practices that we have seen and help you to be able to outline some of these and find ways to incorporate them into your own centre's practices. And then there will be some time throughout the webinar for sharing and reflection. So we'd love for you to have some time to kind of identify some areas for perhaps continuous improvement in your own centres. Now, while this is a webinar, we do find that participants get far much more out of these webinars when they're able to chat with some of the other participants, to share ideas. I'm not going to be doing a lot of this today, but I will encourage you to participate in some of the group discussions. And then certainly, as Cameron mentioned earlier, we've got the chat function there. I'd love to utilise that to get some of your input and ideas at various points throughout the webinar. So please don't be shy. We really want to hear your input today. And that begins, I guess, with this first activity, which is going to be facilitated through the Zoom breakout function. So Cameron's going to assist me to put you into breakout groups. And I really just want to cover this first question, this first the topic really. What is student support to you? If you can kind of talk to a bit of a definition that you feel encompasses your different views on what student support is. And then I'd like you to have a discussion with your group around why is it so important?
Unmute.
Anna, I think has a hand up, Kim.
So, yeah, look, in our group, Babak said, fundamentally, students want to feel safe and secure. And I believe that we should look at this as a holistic approach.
Yeah.
Darren mentioned that, and I think this is a great idea, that they have a system where they try to match up mentors and have a buddy system, because the support is more valid and realistic when it's coming from someone who is just ahead of them in their
experience it themselves. Yeah.
And they're offering advice, whether it's academic or things like how to, go to the bank and how to go to the shops, where to buy food. And the incentive for those mentors is book vouchers or free lunch, etc. And Sigia mentioned that she likes to do like a needs analysis to find out students' levels of literacy and numeracy and digital literacy, so that she can help them and set them up on a one-to-one basis before they actually start their courses.
Yeah, great. Again, excellent points. And I really like the first point that you made, talking about the student needing to feel safe and putting the focus on all of this on the student's experience. So look, thank you both, and thank you everyone for engaging in that activity. Look, this is sort of a definition that we're putting forward. And note in our definition the wording of made available. So education providers, you must give overseas students access to a range of services. And this can be done either by providing the service in-house or having an arrangement to refer overseas students to affordable and high quality external professional services. So look, in some circumstances, it may be more practical to simply guide a student and give them the tools and the access that they need to take advantage of a high quality external professional service than to try to set something up in-house that's potentially not quality, or it's not financially viable, for example. I will just mention as well that NEAS has begun endorsing a number of different aspects of the ELT community, and this is one of the goals of the Endorsed Products and Services initiative, that we're aiming to sort of create a network of endorsed quality products and services that we can vouch for, that our members can vouch for as being sort of high quality and trusted products and services for either international students to access or for institutions to take advantage of. And again, I'd refer you back just to our website to check out more in that area. Look, just while we're here, there are really many different models for student support. Sometimes, when we're doing our quality review activities, we see marketing staff in centres playing a very strong role in providing student support services. And in many instances, this is because they're able often to speak the first language of students, which is a really great service, particularly to lower English proficiency students. In some other examples, there's highly skilled and trained professionals in student services, not necessarily with the language skills of the first language, but having been through that training, and that's what they're there for in order to kind of help students access support at the college. One might suggest that good practice is having a combination of both, but there's certainly no one size fits all model. Another point that we see a student services department or a team of staff members that are there to provide the student support to all students of the institution. So if we're looking at a university, for example, you've got a university student support department that looks after the higher education students, as well as ELICOS. And look, again, if I can ask you to comment here or provide something in the chat, do you see any risks with this type of model, having student support for all students of an institution, including ELICOS?
Yep. And just on that note, Ben, I'll you've been clear, but I'll get you to turn your video off for now.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Great. Thanks.
Any risks around providing student support to the whole student body, not individual to ELICOS? Darren, can we unmute Darren, please, Cam?
Yep, no worries.
Sorry, Darren, one moment, we can't hear you.
So Darren, I've just Chris, do you?
Oh yeah.
Yep,
Oh,
there we
that's
go.
Hi,
Great.
Darren.
Thanks, Darren.
Yes, we went down that path at an institution at a university I worked at, and then had to go back to support for ELICOS because it just wasn't, you know, the support was aimed at undergraduate students and particularly first year students, and the people providing the support just did not have the skills, you know, the ELICOS skills to even communicate properly with, you know, beginner and intermediate students coming through a pathway.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a disaster, and our students really fell through the cracks, and you were sending them off to another building on the campus or to another campus even, you know, to talk to a stranger who wasn't even equipped to deal with that student. And we had to actually re-employ, you know, it was one of those restructuring, you know, top-down things that happened. And we had to lobby for a student welfare officer to have in-house support once again, because it just wasn't providing the support.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Darren. And I think, you know, we see everyone's coming from a place of good intentions, really. And certainly with trying to integrate ELICOS students into the larger institution, often, again, that's coming from a good place of wanting them to feel part of the university, wanting them to access the same services and ease that transition from ELICOS to higher ed, if that's where they're moving on to. But we're certainly got to be mindful of that balance between nurturing the English language needs of these students and giving them kind of the tailored support that they need at that point in their journey, while also making them feel like they are part of the institution and a valued part of the institution as well. And thank you for your comments in the chat too. I'm able to access that now, and yeah, seeing some great feedback there. I like the point about students not necessarily being vocal about their feedback, and that's going to vary depending on, you know, the country that those students are from. But absolutely, it can be difficult to you know, to get the feedback from those students. So yeah, look, I mean, the risk that we've got listed here, it's obviously problematic because lower English language proficiency students do require a lot more cultural awareness, a lot more support with English language, and I guess training and empathy are key. And perhaps I can point you in the direction of the National Code tutorial that's available through ISANA as well. It's a really good tool to educate professional staff in the National Code and how to provide quality student support services, as well as any kind of in-house cultural awareness training. We see some great examples of that in a lot of our school members as well, where the ELICOS teachers are involved in doing PD and helping the mainstream teachers to understand the, you know, the specific needs of English language learners. Okay, so the second part to that question was, why is it so important? Because it is part of our ESOS Act. Why is providing high quality tailored student support so important? Can anyone else share their thoughts here? Again, just hands up. I can see you all now.
Yeah, and you're also able to unmute as well. So
Louise, can I pick on you? Why is student support important?
I think it's just building a community and building a communication. And I think without them being provided with support and then feeling part of the community, they're not going to attend the lectures. So in a more practical academic way, if they don't feel part of the community, they don't feel accountable for showing up, they're not going to come, they're not going to pass their course. So supporting is not only just assisting them with living in Australia, but it's also assisting us with making sure that they're coming to classes and they're getting the education that they need and that they've come for.
Yeah.
So I think it's like it's a two-way situation. I think it needs to be flexible as well, because obviously we assume that students are coming here who already have some sort of level of English and some sort of academic want or motivation, when I think nowadays, maybe in the last 3 years, students are coming here for survival.
Yeah.
So their needs aren't necessarily getting the certificate to go to uni or going to a diploma course, but just kind of being here and living here and sending money home. So we have to be flexible and understand them as an individual to then motivate them to learn.
Yeah, great. A very student-centered response. Thanks, Louise. And then we're getting a lot of student-centric responses in the chat too. So keeping them motivated, for example. Support is part of respecting and acknowledging them. Thank you for that one. Giving them a good experience in Australia, and it helps with the quality of their learning experience. So I'm really pleased to see those comments coming in, focusing very much on the student. And then certainly the top point here that we would put forward is we would encourage this as a core value of all of our English language teaching centres and members to have the core of their institution is that you want your students to feel safe, to be happy, and to be informed about their course and their journey here in Australia. However,
another thing. Can I add another?
Yeah, Darren,
thing?
By all means.
Another thing to bear in mind is it's actually a really good area of risk to explore. A lot of people don't actually see it as a risk area, but actually the more that you can, build in safety, confidence, the more you're mitigating the risk of the student having, getting into some difficulty or having a bad experience, or, worst case scenario, we had a student who unfortunately suicided. And I'm always mindful of that student. And I thought, wow, that our risk, well, we didn't include it in risk. And I thought it's always reminded me that we didn't see it as a risk area. And I think it actually is a very good risk area, student support. And how do you actually, identify what are the risks of students falling through the cracks? What are your strategies to mitigate certain things happening? How do you, monitor and deploy those mitigate? And what do you do if it does become an issue? A student losing their passport, going out, not telling their homestay, losing their passport, they have to go back to Japan in 2 days' time. That happens.
Yeah.
How do you, work back from that scenario, and what kind of mitigations can you put in place to stop that from happening?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and what a horrible way to learn that lesson, So
exactly,
it's certainly a big part of where we were coming from with Quality Area G. And although that's been a little boring for some and felt quite cumbersome, having to develop critical incident policies and risk management frameworks and all of this, it is all about prevention and not having to kind of be in that situation and realize that there's not systems in place to protect, to support the student and their family, but to protect the centre as well. And just moving on to the second point here, second to the students' needs, of course, the centre and the sector's needs. So it's important that we've got quality student support systems in place to ensure our students are having a great experience and that Australia remains a competitive study destination. We want students to keep coming back and to spread the word that they're well supported, well looked after and valued in Australia. Finally, and hopefully this is not the main motivator for any of you, but it's to remain compliant. So if a centre doesn't have the first or the second value as part of their framework, thankfully it's in the ESOS Act and the National Code. And I'd refer you to Standard 6, which is very specific around what kind of support is needed to protect our students. Okay, so look, I know many of you, and perhaps you're very familiar now with the NEAS quality framework, and that's great. If you're not so familiar with it, these are the main areas, I suppose, the main 7 quality areas. There are others, including our online delivery area H, but for today we are just going to focus on the first 7, and I'm going to launch a poll. And the poll is going to ask you which quality area or areas cover student support? That's all I'm going to say at the moment. I'd like you to respond to the poll. I'm going to launch that now. You should have access to that. So if you can answer, you can pick more than one. It's always so tempting to commentate on the polls. It's interesting watching it all unfold. 12 out of 19. So if you haven't answered yet, just do that quickly.
All right, we'll allow another 5 seconds.
Might be you and I, Cam. Final. Oh no.
Yep. One more. All right, we'll wait another 2 minutes. I say 2 seconds, and we'll stop there.
Okay, that'll do. Wonderful. And the winner is, drum roll, the student experience. I will just say, whoever that smarty pants was that voted first and just kind of clicked on everything, well done. Some of you would have probably guessed this was in fact a trick poll, because while Area B certainly does cover a large aspect of student support services, there are in fact quality principles and then more detailed quality drivers in each area of the framework. It's designed that way, and it's designed to look at some of these things from those different angles. So I'm sharing those results with you now. I'm going to just close that down. And so the NEAS quality framework is best used by applying lenses. So what I mean by applying lenses is when we, for example, apply the student support lens to the quality framework, we can illuminate the relevant information for that lens or for that area. For example, I think I noticed that quality area D was the second from last in the poll. So not typically an area that you would associate with student support. However, when we wave this, you can imagine you're putting your student support glasses on, or this lens over quality area D, you can see that these principles and drivers start to jump out, and there are ones in there that specifically pertain to the provision of services or support services to students. In this case, we're looking at how the organizational structure and the management and the policies and procedures support this area. So this is a really effective strategy, and it's one that we would encourage you to use. We'd encourage our members to use it, but if you're not a member of NEAS, the framework is actually publicly available now. You can find it on our website, something that we want to get out there because we want, we want what's best for the international student and the industry. So we would encourage you to use the framework in this way to develop organizational structures in any area. So for example, this process could be just as effective if you were to apply a WHS lens, for example, or a communications lens, an ethics lens, or even a risk lens. And when we apply the student support lens to the quality framework, we can illuminate some of the following information in each area. And I will just point out, of course, there's going to be some crossover, and you may look at this and think some things don't belong, but our organizations are connected and collaborative. We don't sort of operate in independent silos that are discrete and that don't communicate and support one another. So it's natural that there's going to be some crossover here. There's certainly always been a lot of crossover between Area B and Area F. Area F is just, I guess, the more specific young learners focused Area B. So this is one way that the NEAS quality framework can be used as a framework for student support. Okay, so to supplement this, I guess, organization-wide framework that we've just looked at, you might then consider categorizing the different student support areas into different categories or areas of support. So I'd like to get some input from you once more using the chat this time. If you can put in the chat some different areas of student support that come to mind. For example, academic support. Just going to open that chat up now. Health and safety, student support, great. Legal support, excellent. Yeah, Megan, you make a good point, and that there is certainly a lot of information that is already compiled in various websites. Certainly the state, Study New South Wales, Study Adelaide, for example, have information compiled and ready to go. We'd certainly recommend that that be tailored and tweaked according to your location and your individual students, though. But I'm loving some of these other areas: mental health, yep, harassment, accommodation, pathways, wonderful. Good job. So there are more in there than what we're going to put on this slide, but this is, I guess, a really good summary. Firstly, these, I guess, are what we see as the pillars of student support. We often see a lot more work and a significant student support defined in these three areas. However, there's support offered around visa conditions and maintaining student visas, work, accommodation, which was mentioned, cultural support, and then career support. And again, there was some really great, excellent additional areas mentioned in the chat. And what I'd like to do now is, I'm not going to, go through each single one of these boxes. That'd be incredibly painful, but just to look at the first three and to give you some practical examples. In relation to well-being, physical health and safety is a very important part of this area. And here are some key points to consider, or that should be part of your student support provision in this area. Safety on campus would involve regular workplace health and safety assessments. An important part of this is informing and involving the students in this, making sure they're aware of any risks and that they're aware that these things are, taken seriously at the centre. We see great examples, particularly where there are younger learners at a centre. We see great examples of signage and procedures for having the students move safely around a campus. And look, I guess this is going to be particularly important once we're able to have students come back in a post-lockdown world. Social distancing and those sorts of things are certainly going to still be there, and we'll have to consider how we have students move and exist safely on our premises. And then, of course, under 18s would entail a whole other range of measures with regards to safety on campus when you think about supervision and having separate amenities and so forth. Personal safety when going out. This is an area that we've seen centres start to kind of put more emphasis on. Local tours, when it's safe to do so, are a great way to familiarise students with their immediate environment, to discuss safe and not so safe areas of the city or the town in which the centre is. And then there's also apps and services to support this area as well. A great example is Sonder. Perhaps some of you are familiar with Sonder, S-O-N-D-E-R. I'll mention just at this point here that I'm going to be referencing some examples, and I've included the links in the notes to this presentation, which will be made available after the webinar if you'd like to access any of those. Public transport and road safety. There's some really great information on studyinaustralia.gov.au that provides information on basic road rules, but you'd want to be covering things like how to get a bus, train, or tram pass, how to access taxis and Ubers safely. And we see some great examples of this happening in member centres. Medical assistance, perhaps you want to elevate that in your list in current times. It should be part of the centre's provision that the what, where, who, when, and how of doctors and medical assistants and support for understanding overseas student health cover, for example, is really important. I've included a link that has some basic info on overseas student health cover as well, that it's sort of worthwhile in making sure that students are well informed about the reason for having that and what that actually means for their health and safety while studying in Australia. And then, look, I'm really pleased that we've already covered this last point, the importance of risk management and having a critical incident policy in place. If your centre doesn't have something like this, I would implore you to prioritise developing one. There's a really great sample that you can access. It's of a NEAS endorsed centre, Australian Pacific College. Yes, I have their permission to share their example, but it's also publicly available online. And it includes things like, firstly, a preamble, so a statement in the policy of why we have this policy, what it means to our centre, why we value it, and we want to have a policy around it. And then clear definitions are important. So in this case, what is a critical incident? Is this critical incident going to cover things like, as Darren mentioned earlier, suicides and mental health occurrences, but then you want to have natural events as well. And then this particular policy is really comprehensive in that it goes on to outline the plans, the resources that are in place. A really important aspect is managing the media and privacy. So, in the very unfortunate event that Darren outlined earlier, there should be a plan in place for managing that. How do we protect the interests and the safety of that student and their family? How do we act in a professional and ethical way as a centre to deal with that? That should all be documented in the policy. Otherwise, it's a really risky position to be in. And then, of course, this policy has some excellent templates and checklists as well. So if you wanted to view that sample, happy to send it to you afterwards or just point you in the right direction. Australian Pacific College's policy is a really great example of a quality example. Now, look, I wanted to include some visuals here. As difficult a time as COVID has been, it's been an excellent opportunity for many to step up. And we've seen some amazing support offered to international students among our members. Here's one great example where a NEAS endorsed centre, backed by Study New South Wales, was able to provide food hampers to students in need. And look, I'm sure you've got some great examples of your own. I'd love to hear more of those, but I am just mindful of the time and we need to keep moving forward. Now, mental health would be, I guess, the other really crucial part of well-being. Couldn't be left out today. It's equally as important as physical health and safety, particularly at a time like this. Now, I certainly don't claim to be an expert in this area, but what we see is some of the key conditions affecting international students are stress, anxiety, depression, and just extreme worry about their studies and their future. And one strategy that we're seeing a lot more of, and particularly now that we're working a lot with education agents through endorsing agents, is that they're heavily involved in helping the students get a realistic expectation of how they're going to feel and what it's going to be like when they arrive in Australia and they commence their studies. I'm sure that your colleges cover culture shock. We've seen that kind of incorporated into syllabuses over the years. But taking that further and actually breaking that down prior to students arriving and giving them a realistic expectation of how they might feel, the highs and lows to expect, and then preventative measures and breaking down or trying to begin to break down the shame and the stigma that is associated with mental health. And then, of course, a really important part of that as well is while we're trying to break down the stigma and the shame, we need to ensure that students feel that they're going to be treated with confidentiality and respect. Staff training is key really here, and there's some great training courses you can do. The mental health first aid training course, I've provided the link to in the notes for this webinar. And then there's also the accidental counsellor training, which some of you may have done as well. Great ways to upskill staff to be prepared to deal with some of these situations. Thank you for your continued input into the chat too, by the way, everybody. I don't have it sort of open with me, but I can see there's constant commentary here, which is excellent. Here's another great example of the provision of mental health support at a member centre. So thanks to Sunshine Coast International College for sharing some of this information with us. They've just completed a quality review and are doing an amazing job of supporting their students. And this is a really good example of, we don't have to have the in-house staff or resources. It's great if you do, but it's important that you're connecting students with those professional services and making them accessible. I mean, in this example, you can see it's offered in various languages, and this is from the Transcultural Mental Health Centre, and there are others. Look, I came across this visual as well, just a minor addition to this webinar, but I just thought it was really visually appealing, and a great sort of example of just providing that information to students and getting that in their faces and making it just a part of, in the handbook, in collateral that they receive. It's very obvious to them that you value their mental health and their well-being, and you're there to support them in accessing those services. And doing it in this way means, if you've got those students that are sort of shy or don't want to come forward to a staff member about these things, they can go and access it through a QR code or a phone number. Of course, academic support is very important, and we've got a list here which I'm not going to go through one by one, but some important aspects of a centre's provision in this area. I do note the last point of ILPs and PLPs. In case you don't know what that means, that's individual learning plans or personalised learning plans. It's really good to hear you already comment on that in our chat earlier around the importance of individualising the support. It does need to be equity, but the support needs to be tailored to the needs of that individual student. I want to show you another example of good practice. This is a really great visual tool that Macquarie Uni has put together. Again, it's publicly available, but flowcharts are good, particularly with our low English proficiency students. It's good that they can kind of view something and see a clear process and know steps involved. If they're having trouble with their course and their learning and assessment outcomes. The box there in the middle, student advisors. I love that kind of clearly outlines what's involved and what resources and tools those student advisors have at their disposal to help the students. Another good feature about this particular visual is that the final stage there over to the right-hand side is, we'll discuss your case with student advisors. So that's representing that it is going to be treated on a case-by-case individualized basis. There's no need to kind of go into the potentially negative outcome of this, if you like. So great example there. Finally, the third key pillar there of student support is the social support that we provide. This is essential to any quality student experience, the development of good relationships and the creation of a sense of belonging. It's important that relevant, age and culturally appropriate, and I've put in brackets here, and affordable social support and social activities are made available to students. This is something that I believe many centres are missing at the moment and craving, and students are missing that. I'm getting that in quality review visit focus groups that students, they want more excursions. They miss being able to connect and, be involved in those social activities. And, we'd certainly recommend further exploration into how to engage students in virtual activities. I know that can be very difficult, and some centres have given up on trying to do those things because the students aren't interested in engaging in a virtual space. But we're aware of some centres that are doing more sort of research and work into how to create something that's of interest to students to get them to connect and be motivated to participate in those social activities. I'd love to hear more of your ideas. If you want to email NEAS or just get in touch with us afterwards, please share. Just a key point here, once we do have students back on site, the premises layout and the design for student services and support. Some of you may have worked with C2C Global. They're a great organization that kind of look at how your space can be more conducive to things like fostering community and social interaction. So if you need some advice, that they may be a good place to start in terms of setting your premises up to support social activities. And then look, all of these things are important to provide either in-house or through a trusted quality third-party provider, as I mentioned previously. Very quickly here, because we have spoken about our NEAS premium products in the past, and certainly University of Sydney's CET Connect app has been endorsed as a premium product now for several years, as has the University of Newcastle Student Experience. They remain endorsed premium products because they're fantastic examples of taking this social pillar of student support seriously. So there's more information about these, again, on the NEAS website. You can kind of read more details about what's involved in each. The CET Connect one is obviously an app, so a little bit more sort of investment involved in setting something like that up. But the methodology around how they've put that together in terms of gamifying experience and giving points and rewards at each stage for students participating in various events and activities that are set up is a really great example. And then the student experience is similar in that there are recommended and suggested activities for students to participate in throughout their study journey. And then they get a really good kind of souvenir at the end, which is like a passport, if you like. Look, on a low budget, there are a range of other resources and tools that can be used to facilitate similar experiences. And Goose Chase comes to mind. Many of you have probably used Goose Chase. It is an app that helps you set up scavenger hunts. Maybe not so great for our current times, but once we're able to do these sorts of things again, Goose Chases are fantastic. You can organize teams to go on, on hunts and activities to socialize and connect. And there are a range of other things that can be used, online groups, forums, blogs, chats, to support this. I wanted to include a slide here acknowledging the current situation that we are in. Otherwise, felt a little, not irrelevant, but just a little out of touch. So we're not going to spend a lot of time going through all of this, but certainly here are some key considerations or things that have been being discussed lately in relation to, what's student support going to look like or going to require as we move beyond this this immediate sort of coronavirus lockdown. And then certainly strategic planning, as dull and boring as that sounds, is really going to be one of the key things or key features of centres that are going to survive and thrive beyond this period. And it's organisations that have really prudent business plans and have thought through their strategy and their goals for moving out of COVID, risk management, as we've covered today, and really carefully considered strategic initiatives. A number of centres are really capitalising on this, in inverted commas, downtime to reflect, to review and rebuild a leaner model through quality assurance that's going to best prepare them to pivot and to take advantage of opportunities as they arise. The Association of Language Travel Organisations, so an organisation called ALTO, did a survey with students, an international survey. They published it in the ISF Monitor, and it looked at what's going to impact a student's decision as to what country they study in. And there are a number of things which is really quite interesting to read. Obviously things around the visa wait times and the border restrictions at the time. But one key thing that came up is COVID-19 policy and procedures. So students are actually going to care and going to be interested in how pandemics and other medical events are going to be managed moving forward. So I guess there's a sense that, perhaps everything we've learned throughout COVID-19 is not just going to go away once this pandemic is over, and that students want to be assured that, heaven forbid, another pandemic were to occur, what sort of policies and procedures are in place to protect them if they come to Australia. Access to quality healthcare, and I mentioned before, we need to maybe be a little bit more explicit and support our agents with outlining overseas student healthcare and helping students to understand what's involved in that and what rights they have with their healthcare. Of course, investment in digital capacity is going to be important, and transnational education. So thank you for sticking with me. I know we've gone over time now. I can see most of you are still there, and that's fantastic. I'm just going to open up for questions now or comments. We've only really got two minutes for this, so I'm happy to kind of field any longer ones after the webinar as well. But yeah, hands up. I can see you all now if you have a question, or you can use the chat. Louise?
I think everyone's kind of like got similar thinking when it comes to like mental health and like food and accommodation. But one thing that Alexandra said earlier, and we've actually had quite a few discussions here, about employment and financial support. Like where do we go to for that? And should we be even touching employment support here?
Good question. You should.
Okay.
Certainly be touching us. Nothing's a no-touch zone.
Okay.
Bear with me.
Yeah.
So I wanted just to point out in relation to that question, the website studyinaustralia.gov.au. Perhaps many of you know this site. Perhaps you've been to this site before. It's got a great compilation of all the support that is being offered in Australian states in different settings and sectors as well. So it shows kind of what's being done in higher ed, in schools, in vet. It's probably a really good reference point to kind of get some of those ideas. And I've certainly got, I think, another couple of links I can probably send you afterwards, Louise, of support for work rights and just around legal support for students as well.
Yep.
But yeah, certainly not a no-go zone, and you should be looking at how you can support students in that area, particularly if there's a need for it and they're asking for it.
Yeah. Okay.
Would anyone else, like to respond to Louise? If not, getting a lot of thank yous, and perhaps people need to run, so that's fine. You need to go. I've kept you over time, so I really appreciate you attending and participating and getting involved in all of the discussions. See if I can get away with putting my video back on without the lag. Yeah. Again, Cameron will be sending this PowerPoint and all of the notes. So if you are interested in any of the links or the resources that I've referenced today, you're more than welcome to access those. And of course, get in touch with us if you have any specific questions as well.